This is America in the Morning from Westwood One. Good morning, I'm John Trout. It's Monday, March 18th, 2024. Here's what's coming up on America in the Morning.
Donald Trump warns of a bloodbath if he's not reelected.
Now, if I don't get elected, it's going to be a bloodbath.
I'm John Stolnis in Washington.
The ball bounces to the Senate's court when it comes to TikTok.
I think the intent of the bill is good.
I'm Clayton Neville.
A report finds that Maine authorities should have seized the weapons and detained a man weeks before he committed the state's deadliest mass shooting. I'm Norman Hall.
Chicago's new plan on housing migrants.
New week, Fed meeting, but no interest rate cuts are expected. Turns out inflation isn't going down in a straight line. I'm Jessica Ettinger.
A New Mexico manhunt leads to the capture of a suspect in the murder of a state trooper and the owner of a stolen car.
President Biden's campaign fundraising picked up last month, exceeding the total held by Donald Trump. I'm Jackie Quinn.
All ahead on America in the Morning. At a rally in Dayton, Ohio Saturday, the presumptive Republican nominee warned of a bloodbath if he's not elected, drawing the scorn of critics while rallying his supporters. John Stolnis has more from Washington.
Trump's hour-plus-long speech Saturday night began with a recording sung by people convicted of crimes over their involvement in the riots at the Capitol on January 6th.
Can you see the spirit from the hostages? And that's what they are, is hostages.
Trump's former Vice President Mike Pence told CBS's Face the Nation those comments are out of line.
There are American hostages being held in Gaza that the president or any other leaders would refer to people that are moving through our justice system as hostages, and it's just unacceptable.
In speaking about Chinese automakers making cars in Mexico, Trump said,
We're going to put a 100% tariff on every single car that comes across the line, and you're not going to be able to sell those cars if I get elected. Now, if I don't get elected, it's going to be a bloodbath for the whole... That's going to be the least of it. It's going to be a bloodbath for the country. That'll be the least of it.
The Biden campaign claims Trump is hoping for another January 6th after those bloodbath comments. But Republican Senator Bill Cassidy on NBC's Meet the Press says the bloodbath remarks have to be taken into context.
He's running against Biden, so Biden's going to say it's about political violence. His defenders want to defend him, and so they're going to say it's about economic disaster. There's always just that little bit of tension there.
On the crisis at the border, Trump spoke again of violent acts on Americans by those who cross the border illegally.
Young people, they're in jail for years, and if you call them people, I don't know if you call them people. In some cases, they're not people, in my opinion, but I'm not allowed to say that because the radical left says that's a terrible thing to say. They say you have to vote against him because did you hear what he said about humanity? These are animals, okay?
After the speech, Pence admits he cannot endorse his former boss for another 4 years in the White House.
The reason that I cannot in good conscience endorse Donald Trump this year also has to do with the fact that he is walking away, not just from keeping faith with the Constitution on that day, but also, Margaret, with a commitment to fiscal responsibility, a commitment to the sanctity of life, a commitment to American leadership in the world.
John Stolnis, Washington.
Lawmakers on Capitol Hill are reacting to the recently passed bill in the U.S. House surrounding TikTok. Correspondent Clayton Neville has the latest.
The legislation passed last week in the House would force Chinese company ByteDance to sell TikTok or face a ban from American app stores. TikTok executives are asking American users to protect their constitutional rights, and there have been a number of protests over the bill. Republican Congressman Mike Turner clarified on ABC's This Week that the legislation is not a ban on TikTok.
This is actually a piece of legislation that requires that the Chinese ownership of TikTok be divested so that we would sever that relationship between Chinese ownership, the Chinese government, the Chinese Communist Party that is of such troubling concern.
Information sharing with the Chinese government at the heart of the concerns. The fate of the bill, though, uncertain as it heads to the U.S. Senate. Majority Leader Chuck Schumer hasn't said that he'll bring it to the floor. Louisiana Republican Senator Bill Cassidy was asked by NBC's Meet the Press if he would vote for it.
I'd like to see the final language, but I'm certainly predisposed to vote for it. Anyone that doesn't think that the Chinese Communist Party would like to influence how we think in our country just doesn't understand what they do.
Senator J.D. Vance on Fox and Friends.
I think the intent of the bill is good. I think it's good, actually, to try to prevent the CCP from having a spy app in our country. But I do worry about how overbroad it is, and I think that's what we have to work on in the United States Senate.
Democratic Representative Ro Khanna voted against the bill and spoke with ABC's This Week.
This bill is not actually addressing the issue. 71% of Americans want to protect data privacy. Only 31% want to ban on TikTok. Congress doesn't understand, in my view, all of the social media and how it's working.
The House-passed bill gives 180 days for ByteDance to sell, but business experts told the Washington Post that timeline is extremely tight because of the complexities of a potential deal. With a price tag around $100 billion, a TikTok merger would be one of the biggest ever. AOL and Time Warner's merger almost took a year to go through, and Elon Musk's purchase of Twitter took 6 months to close. As for TikTok execs, they say they'll do what they can within their legal rights to fight the House legislation. I'm Clayton Neville.
Migrant evictions in Chicago. We'll have that and more when America in the Morning continues after these messages. Welcome back. You're with America in the Morning. Tomorrow, the first day of spring 2024. Today, we'll be contending with, in the south, some frost and freeze warnings and thunderstorms. An update on the forecast with AccuWeather.com meteorologist LaTroy Thornton.
Severe thunderstorms will be in the forecast for one more day as a slow-moving cold front finally gets a push offshore on Monday, with a limited part of the Florida peninsula stretching from the Jacksonville area through the Tampa and Orlando metropolitan areas on the lookout for hail and damaging wind gusts into Monday evening. The rest of the southeast looks to be dry on Monday, with drier air behind the front expected to produce quieter weather through much of the south after the days-long severe weather event. Parts of Texas along the Mexican border will continue to see showers as part of the front hangs up in the area, with the rest of the plains looking quite dry on Monday and even Tuesday as strong high pressure holds firmly in place for the most part. The same cannot be said for the southwest, where rain and high-elevation snow showers will persist yet another day as a pesky disturbance continues to spin overhead. This activity has been ongoing for days now, and the region will not see a reprieve for at least the first half of the week. On the other hand, the northwest does look dry to start the week as the storm track makes a pass to the north into southwestern Canada, with high temperatures in the 70s for places like Portland, Oregon. The Northeast remains active on Monday and into the start of the week, with lake-effect snow continuing off of all 5 Great Lakes through the day, and even reaching as close to the East Coast as eastern Pennsylvania, with a burst of colder air and gusty winds. Snow chances will continue through at least the first half of the week before a disturbed area of weather passes off to the east. That's the weather across America. I'm AccuWeather.com meteorologist LaTroy Thornton.
Remember, follow us wherever you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, Amazon, and YouTube. Just search America in the Morning in your favorite listening app. I'm John Trout. A new report says law enforcement should have seized a man's guns and had the legal right to put him in protective custody weeks before he committed Maine's deadliest mass shooting. Correspondent Norman Hall reports.
An independent commission reviewed the events that led up to Army Reservist Robert Card killing 18 people in October at a bowling alley and a bar in Lewiston.
They found that there was probable cause to take Robert Card into custody, order a medical evaluation, and likely take his firearms away. They also found that there was enough evidence to prosecute Card with assaulting another Army reservist. And based on the circumstances, law enforcement should have acted, but didn't.
Former federal prosecutor Niyama Ramani says there were many so-called yellow flag law signals that were overlooked.
The fact that he was involuntarily committed at a psychiatric institution, but he still had access to 10 to 15 firearms.
One parent who lost his son called the report findings heartbreaking all over again. I'm Norman Hall.
Chicago officials begin evicting some migrants from shelters, joining other cities that have made similar moves to ease pressure on overstretched resources. WLS-TV is reporting that the evictions represent the start of a policy the city announced in November, but is repeatedly delayed because of the winter months. Over 2,000 migrants sent to Chicago are expected to lose their temporary housing by the end of April, with that housing being given temporarily to new arriving migrants. Families with children will be exempt from the evictions. Purportedly, Chicago has received more than 37,000 migrants since August of 2022. When we return on America in the Morning, the Vanishing Realtors Commission, after these messages. America in the Morning. Electric vehicles may have cost the CEO of one of the largest rental car companies in the world his job. Stephen Scher said he's stepping down as the leader of Hertz Global Holdings at the end of the month. It was Scher who spurred Hertz to buy 100,000 Tesla EVs and take the lead in electric car rentals. But the combination of high repair costs, costly depreciation in car value, and limited interest from renters forced Hertz to do an about-face and sell off a third of their EV fleet. Here's CNBC's Jessica Ettinger with a check of Monday business.
Wall Street opens this morning after a down week for the major averages last week, the second in a row for the S&P 500 index, but it's still up 7% for the year so far. We'll see if tech shares rebound at all this week. Amazon last week fell 0.5%. Google shares, its parent Alphabet, down 1%. Intel down 3%. Facebook parent Meta lost 4% last week. Then there's Boeing, which was down 8% last week. It's lost a third of its value so far this year. This after the MAX 9 door plug blowout and other issues. Its reputation is certainly damaged, but some say Boeing's not damaged to the point where airlines won't do business with it.
The big picture is if there were a real problem, obviously the FAA would have shut down Boeing and its processes, and that's not the case. I think the real news is Administrator Whitaker from the FAA said that in the next 30 days they're planning on coming up with milestones with Boeing to increase production rates. And I think that's the material piece of data that I look at as an investor.
Gabelli Fund's portfolio manager and former Marine pilot Tony Bancroft on CNBC. The Fed begins a two-day meeting on interest rates tomorrow. There's a debate over when the Fed will begin cutting rates. Last fall, the market priced in 6 cuts for 2024, then maybe 3 cuts this year. Now?
3 cuts would be a surprise to me. 2 cuts at most if the economy stays as strong as it has been. And I wouldn't be surprised by that. I would say we're going to have a relatively strong 2024. And then if there is an adjustment year, we'll be in 2025.
Former Kansas City Fed President Thomas Honig on CNBC. Target started limiting the number of items you can take through self-checkout to 10 over the weekend at many stores. Customers overall say they don't really like self-checkout. The chain will open more staffed checkout lanes.
Jessica, realtors making 6% commission. Is that a thing of the past?
You know, we're not sure yet, but it is a major change for residential real estate. The National Association of Realtors agreed to pay more than $400 million to settle antitrust lawsuits over fixed broker commissions.
The lawsuits argued that NAR, with its more than 1 million brokerage members, violated antitrust laws by setting certain requirements that led to a standard commission. The settlement now bans the NAR from making any set rules that would let a seller's agent compensate for a buyer's agent. The norm had been 6% commissions, although the NAR said they vehemently denied that there are any set commissions, saying they are always negotiable. What this means is that the agent market will now get much more competitive, which could in turn lower commissions.
CNBC's Diana Olick. On today's watch list, we find out how home builders are feeling about their business. We also get the latest business leaders survey today, and tax day is 4 weeks from today.
Thanks for the reminder, CNBC's Jessica Ettinger. When we return on America in the Morning, the campaign purse, a check on candidates' fundraising efforts. Back after these messages. Welcome back. This is America in the Morning. A suspect in the shooting death of a New Mexico state police officer was captured Sunday by law enforcement outside of Albuquerque, New Mexico. Authorities said New Mexico State Police Officer Justin Hare was dispatched to help a motorist with a flat tire. When the trooper arrived, he approached a BMW and, without warning, was shot multiple times. The shooter then left the scene in the trooper's state police car. The person detained by officers in connection with the murder, 33-year-old Jeremy Smith of South Carolina, who was shot during his apprehension and hospitalized. Police later discovered that the same BMW was reported missing and belonged to a South Carolina woman who was found dead last week. Charges in both states are pending. In the first financial report since both President Joe Biden and former President Donald Trump clinched the delegates needed to lead their parties into the 2024 election, correspondent Jackie Quinn reports on fundraising for November's presidential race.
Restore the soul of this country. When I ran the first time, I meant it.
The president says enthusiasm for his campaign is picking up. Campaign officials say in February alone, President Biden raised $53 million, the highest grassroots number since his re-election campaign began. Biden reported $155 million in cash on hand. Meanwhile, his opponent...
We will turn the page forever on the miserable nightmare of the Biden presidency.
Donald Trump hasn't released his February figures, but in January he had just $36 million cash on hand, with his campaign committees spending more than what came in. A major factor is millions of dollars in Trump's legal fees. I'm Jackie Quinn.
America in the Morning for Monday, March 18th, 2024 is produced by Jeff McKay. Senior producer Kevin Delaney. I'm John Trout. This is Westwood One. This is America in the Morning from Westwood One. I'm John Trout. Coming up this half hour.
President Vladimir Putin has won a landslide victory in the presidential election. I'm Lawrence Brooks.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's hitting back against growing U.S. criticism.
For getting the hostages out.
I'm Jackie Quinn.
Assessing damage and beginning to recover from deadly tornadoes. I'm Clayton Neville.
Many questions still remain after 2 shooting incidents in a Pennsylvania community left 3 dead. I'm Haya Panjwani.
Apple has agreed to pay $490 million to settle a class action lawsuit. I'm Mike Hempen.
Trump White House official Peter Navarro appealed to the Supreme Court to allow him to stay out of prison. Norman Hall, Washington.
Back after these messages. Welcome back, and thanks for listening. You're with America in the Morning. Winter's still trying to hang on, and it will for one more day. Here's AccuWeather.com meteorologist LaTroy Thornton.
The east, particularly the northeast and Great Lakes regions, will remain active to start the week, with lake effect snow continuing off the Great Lakes through the day on Monday, and really for the first half of this week, with snow showers on Monday reaching areas such as eastern New York and West Virginia, and even parts of New Hampshire, being driven by gusty winds delivering a burst of colder air. The mid-Atlantic looks to be largely dry today, as does much of the southeast, but a persistent cold front will finally get a shove off the coast on Monday, bringing the risk for severe thunderstorms to part of the Florida Peninsula, including the Jacksonville, Tampa, and Orlando metropolitan areas, with hail and damaging wind gusts possible into Monday evening. The rest of the southeast should be dry today and cooler behind the front, as calmer weather spreads across the majority of the south following days of severe weather. The exception is West and South Texas, where showers continue as the storm remains in place through the area. Those showers will extend into the southwest, where high-elevation snow showers will continue yet another day, and into at least the middle of this week, with a slow-moving storm remaining in the area. Drier conditions will work into much of the plains and even northern parts of the Four Corners region, with areas of sprawling, strong high pressure promoting sunshine and calm conditions. Even the Northwest looks to get the week off to a fair start, with stormy conditions largely confined to British Columbia and Alberta, Canada, as temperatures reach the 60s and even the 70s for some. In Memphis, Tennessee, look for a breezy and colder day today with lots of sun and a high of only 50. Buffalo, New York will have a cloudy Monday with a couple of snow showers, any of which could briefly reduce visibility, the high 38. That's the nation's weather. I'm AccuWeather.com meteorologist LaTroy Thornton.
Remember, you can follow us wherever you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, Amazon, and YouTube. Just search America in the Morning in your favorite listening app. I'm John Trout. Vladimir Putin may have won re-election in Russia by a landslide, but it did not come without controversy, as there were a number of protests during the three-day election, which included fires being set in at least 2 polling stations. Putin's victory was also marred by a large Ukrainian drone attack, with targets including Moscow being hit. Correspondent Lawrence Brooks reports.
Russian officials have released early returns showing President Vladimir Putin has won a landslide victory in the presidential election. Russia's Central Election Commission says Putin has 87.97% of the vote. A win will extend his rule by another 6 years and takes place against the backdrop of the harshest crackdown on political opposition and freedom of speech in Russia since Soviet times. Putin's fiercest political rival, Alexei Navalny, died in an Arctic prison last month, and other critics are either in jail or in exile. Only 3 token candidates and no one who opposes his war in Ukraine were allowed to run against him. Ukraine has launched a new massive wave of drone attacks on Russia. Its defense ministry has reported downing 35 Ukrainian drones overnight, including 4 in the Moscow region. Moscow's mayor Sergei Sobyanin said a drone was downed near one of the capital's airports. No casualties or damage were reported. According to Russia's defense ministry, another 2 drones were shot over the Kaluga region just south of the Russian capital. A drone attack on the Yaroslavl region, located about 800 kilometers from the Ukrainian border, was some of the furthest launched by Ukraine so far. I'm Lawrence Brooks.
Following Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer's call to have Benjamin Netanyahu leave office, Israel's prime minister spoke out Sunday, telling Fox News his nation will continue to fight against terrorism and no country should meddle in its affairs. Correspondent Jackie Quinn reports on the widening flap between the U.S. and Israeli leaders.
We're going to destroy the remaining Hamas terrorist battalions in Rafah. Is both important for eradicating the Hamas rule, but also important for getting the hostages out.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's hitting back against growing U.S. criticism over his handling of the war with Hamas and its death toll in Gaza.
I believe a new election is the only way to allow for a healthy and open decision-making process about the future of Israel. At a time when so many Israelis have lost their confidence in the vision and direction of their government.
On Fox and Friends, Benjamin Netanyahu says,
I think Schumer's statements are wholly inappropriate. I think we're not a banana republic. The people of Israel will choose when they'll have elections, who they elect, and it's not something that will be foisted upon us. That, it's wrong to try to replace the elected leaders of a sister democracy and a staunch American ally at any time, but especially during the time of war.
Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer has called for the prime minister to be replaced through an election, which Netanyahu calls inappropriate.
Just imagine that after 9/11, and when you're in the midst of fighting al-Qaeda and winning, people will say, oh, well, the right thing, some Israeli would say, oh, the right thing to do is now to have new elections in America or have President Bush resign.
He says most Israeli voters support his actions in Gaza after the brutal October 7th attack that killed over 1,000 Israelis.
We're not obstructing peace. We're ensuring that we don't have a catastrophic suicidal move. And second, it's not just me, it's the vast majority of Israelis. So if you want to take up the issue with the vast majority of Israelis, say so. Say you're against the vast majority of the people of Israel. And don't try to personalize it, because it's not a personal thing. I'm leading the policy that most Israelis think is essential for our survival and our future.
I'm Jackie Quinn.
Damage assessments and recovery efforts are underway after at least 3 people were killed in a string of tornadoes that ripped through parts of Indiana and Ohio late last week. Correspondent Clayton Neville has an update.
Ohio Governor Mike DeWine issued a disaster declaration for a dozen counties over the weekend after 9 tornadoes were confirmed by the National Weather Service in Ohio. One of those was an EF3 twister with winds of 136 miles per hour and higher. 3 were reported killed in a trailer park outside Columbus. Indiana hit hard too. Bob McCoy is the mayor of Winchester.
22 homes possibly totally destroyed and 110 badly damaged. Again, very lucky. There was houses that are leveled. Taco Bell leveled. I really praise the Lord for this one, because we could have been, it could have been really bad.
State and local officials were quick to respond and find shelter for those who need it.
This shows, unfortunately, we've been through this before. And so as you go from kind of rescuing to responding to restoring power to then rebuilding, we'll all take a sense of pride in helping you every step along the way.
Indiana Governor Eric Holcomb.
You know, usually it's April, May, June is the brunt of it. But here we are, and fortunately, if there's any good that has come out of some of these severe weather patterns and systems, it's that it has brought us together, and we're experienced and we're in shape for a day like today and the days that follow.
Hail was also a major factor in the string of storms that impacted other neighboring states. Damage reported in parts of Missouri and an emergency declaration in Kentucky, where officials say 100 or more structures were damaged. I'm Clayton Neville.
When we return on America in the Morning, captured after a two-state manhunt, and Apple's settlement in a nearly $500 million lawsuit when America in the Morning continues after these messages. I'm John Trout. You're with America in the Morning. A two-state manhunt came to an end and a Pennsylvania town's lockdown was lifted when police collared a New Jersey man wanted for the murder of 3 people in a Philadelphia suburb. Correspondent Haya Panjwani reports.
Authorities in Trenton, New Jersey say 26-year-old Andre Gordon Jr. was arrested hours after he shot and killed 3 family members and injured another.
We just got some recent information that the suspect was a couple of blocks away from this location where he was apprehended by a Trenton Police Patrol unit. He was apprehended uninjured and without incident.
Bucks County District Attorney Jennifer Shorn on WPVI TV.
After which he shot and killed his 52-year-old stepmother, Karen Gordon, and his 13-year-old sister, Kara Gordon, who lived at the residence.
She says he also allegedly killed the mother of his children at another home. A shelter in place on Saturday disrupted activities in Bucks County, including canceling its local St. Patrick's Day parade. Authorities found no clear motive for the crime. I'm Haya Panjwani.
There's concern in Europe and the U.S. over a proposed plan by Russia to receive ballistic missiles from Iran for their fight against Ukraine. As Washington correspondent Sagar Meghani reports, the U.S. and allies are warning Iran to stop progress on the deal, despite the Iranians saying there is no agreement.
The U.S. and its Western allies are warning Iran of serious consequences if it moves ahead with a plan to provide Russia with ballistic missiles for the war with Ukraine. American officials are worried by comments from Iran suggesting a deal is imminent.
We've sent very clear messages to Iran not to do it.
Secretary of State Antony Blinken says the possibility of it happening and the need to address it are both very real and very strong.
We really wanted to set down a marker here for Iran and for Russia, that there will be swift consequences for them to do that.
White House National Security spokesman John Kirby says Moscow's already received and used North Korean ballistic missiles in Ukraine and has used Iranian weapons in the war.
Heck yeah. Drones by the hundreds.
And Iran is looking to benefit, too.
They're hoping to get Russian military technology for themselves.
Sagar Meghani, Washington.
Apple has agreed to pay $490 million to settle a class action lawsuit that accused CEO Tim Cook of deliberately withholding information on sales that led to billions of dollars in investor losses. Correspondent Mike Hempen has details.
Apple has agreed to pay $490 million to settle a class action lawsuit claiming CEO Tim Cook misled investors about a steep downturn in iPhone sales in China. The complaint says Cook signaled the iPhones released in September 2018 were off to a good start in China, one of the company's biggest markets. But in January 2019, Cook issued a warning that Apple's revenue for the just completed quarter would fall $9 billion below management's forecast. That triggered a 10% plunge in Apple's stock price, wiping out more than $70 billion in shareholder wealth. Apple has vehemently denied Cook deceived investors. The The company says it decided to pay the money to avoid what it calls an overly burdensome, expensive, and distracting hassle. I'm Mike Hempen.
With more and more devices sending larger files and streaming data being broadcast over the internet, one Japanese company has just had a breakthrough that could increase speeds by as much as 2,000%. Here's Chuck Palm with that in today's Tech News.
According to SciTechDaily.com, a breakthrough in optical communications has introduced transmission speeds on standard fiber optic cable at nearly 2,000 times the current rate. A new iridium phosphide-based modulator achieves unprecedented bit rates, promising new, swifter data transmissions. As more content is streamed online and data traffic grows, there is an urgent demand for smaller optical transmitters and receivers capable of handling far greater speeds and quantity of data. Josuke Ozakai from NTT Innovative Design Concepts in Japan said that more services require data capacity, such as video distribution and web conferencing services, have become widespread and enrich our lives. Therefore, more bandwidth is required. Currently, NTT is testing new chips to handle the speeds. Bitcoin down to 69,000 and Ethereum at 3,647. Tell us what you think at allthetoptech.tech. I'm Chuck Palm.
Monday Sports is in with America in the Morning's Robert Workman.
The field of 68 teams is all set for the NCAA basketball tournament. 32 automatic bids and 36 at-large teams all paired up. The regional number one seeds, Connecticut, the defending national champion, number one in the East and the overall top seed after winning the Big East tournament title. Houston is number one in the South region. Purdue tops the Midwest, and North Carolina is atop the West. The play-in games will be in Dayton on Tuesday and Wednesday. Tomorrow, Howard meets Wagner for the right to meet the Tar Heels. Then Virginia and Colorado State clash. That winner will advance to play Texas in the Midwest. On Wednesday, Montana State and Grambling vie for a chance to face Purdue. That's followed by Boise State versus Colorado. The victor gets Florida in the South. The Final Four will be in Glendale, Arizona, the first weekend in April. Three teams that just missed the cut, St. John's, Oklahoma, and Pittsburgh, all declined invitations to the NIT. Indiana State, Wake Forest, Seton Hall, and Villanova are the top seeds in their brackets, with that tournament starting tomorrow at campus sites. The women's brackets are set as well. Undefeated South Carolina is the overall number one, with Iowa, USC, and Texas also on the top line. Their Final Four will be in Cleveland next month. NBA on Sunday, the Celtics steamrolled the Wizards 130-104, 30 points for Jason Tatum and Sam Hauser. He hit 10 of Boston's 24 three-pointers. Coach Joe Mazzulla says they found the hot hand.
His confidence, loved his aggressiveness, loved how guys looked for him, and I love how he got his shots within the flow of our execution.
Elsewhere, the Bucks stopped the Suns 140-129, 31 apiece for Damian Lillard and Bobby Portis. Milwaukee also hit 24 trays on the day. Mavericks nipped the Nuggets on Kyrie Irving's runner at the buzzer. Bam Adebayo's three ball at the buzzer lifted the Heat over the Pistons. Magic ripped the Raptors. Toronto has lost 7 in a row. Hawks soared over the Clippers, and the Spurs cut down the Nets in overtime. Victor Wembanyama had 33 points, 16 rebounds, 7 assists, and 7 blocked shots. Only Kareem, Charles Barkley, and Joel Embiid have ever put up a 30-15-7-7 line like that. That's Monday Sports.
Thanks, Robert. When we return on America in the Morning, former Trump official takes his case to the Supreme Court after these messages. Welcome back here with America in the Morning. Former Trump White House official Peter Navarro is turning to the Supreme Court in a last-ditch effort to remain out of jail over his contempt of Congress sentence. Correspondent Norman Hall reports.
Trump White House official Peter Navarro appealed to the Supreme Court to allow him to stay out of prison as he appeals his contempt of Congress conviction. Navarro is due to report to a federal prison to serve a 4-month sentence. An appeals court ruled that his appeal wasn't likely to overturn his conviction for refusing to cooperate with the congressional investigation into the January 6, 2021 attack on the U.S. Capitol. The emergency application comes as the Supreme Court separately prepares to hear arguments on whether Trump himself has presidential immunity from charges alleging he interfered in the 2020 election. Norman Hall, Washington.
2 movie remakes fought it out for the top spot at the weekend box office. Kevin Carr reports.
Sequels continued to rule movie theaters this weekend.
Stand back.
I'm gonna kick my butt.
Kung Fu Panda 4 delivered another first-place blow at the box office with $30 million. The modestly budgeted forquel is a big hit with families.
You sound surprised. Is it surprising?
Dune Part 2 sandwalked into a close second with a robust $29 million.
You are not prepared for what is to come.
Holding quite well, this grown-up sci-fi adventure looks to perform more like Oppenheimer than a standard action sequel.
May thy knife chip and shatter.
Mark Wahlberg and Arthur the King had to settle for third place with a disappointing $7.5 million.
Meatball? Somebody likes my meatballs?
Even with decent reviews and an A cinema score, the film struggled to find an audience.
Every culture has a name for it. We call them imaginary friends.
The horror flick Imaginary landed in fourth place with $5.5 million. Horror isn't performing as strongly as it did in the last 2 years, but it's enough to make a profit over the film's small budget. And rounding out the top 5 was Angel Studios' Cabrini with $2.9 million.
If we are to build an empire of hope, it seems we must first conquer New York.
This biopic of an Italian missionary is holding well, but it's nowhere close to the success of the studio's juggernaut, The Sound of Freedom, from last summer. Next week will be a test of Dune's staying power as it loses many of its large format screens to Ghostbusters. I'm Kevin Carr.
And with more in entertainment news this Monday, here's Margie Zaraletta.
Model actor Cara Delevingne says her heart is broken after her house in Los Angeles burned down on Friday. Investigators are looking into the cause of the fire. Delevingne is in a stage production of Cabaret in London and was apparently not home. Usher was named Entertainer of the Year at the NAACP Awards Saturday in Los Angeles. He was also given the President's Award for his public service. In the ceremony broadcast on BET, Usher says he owes a lot to his mother, who raised him by herself.
Far too often in our industry do women, not get the recognition that they truly deserve.
I left my heart. San Francisco now runs a cable car that's dedicated to late singer Tony Bennett. It's been running for about a month and goes past the Fairmont Hotel, where he first performed I Left My Heart in San Francisco in 1961. I'm Margie Zaraletta.
That's our show for today, Monday, March 18th, 2024. America in the Morning is produced by Jeff McKay, senior producer Kevin Delaney. I'm John Trout. This is Westwood One.